Hey there, welcome to Film in the Blank. My name's Ian. I watch a lot of movies. Here's everything I watched in the first half of March. I kicked off the month with my orangest white whale of a film, 1971's A Clockwork Orange, written and directed by Stanley Kubrick. One I'd seen parts of in film school but never sat down and watched from start to finish. This always seemed a bit too manic and needlessly provocative from the outside, but from the inside looking out, the journey Kubrick charts resonates much more. The film's manic energy is what allows Kubrick to connect the audience with the pent-up repression and frustrations of Alex's generation. And what seemed needlessly provocative now seems like a misguided but tragic cry for help from Alex and others lost in a system that goes out of its way to devalue and dehumanize them. The film's bold, committed performances, avant-garde production design, and unhinged use of music all swirl together to create a Clockwork Orange's brand of regal chaos that Kubrick seems singularly suited to bring to life on screen. This would need a rewatch or two for me to appreciate everything fully, and it's nowhere near the top of Kubrick's filmography for me, but for a first full-time watch, I'm relieved my brain didn't outright reject it. Great job, brain. 4 stars. Then I went to the theater to see Dune Part 2, written by Denis Villeneuve and John Spates, and directed by Denis Villeneuve. I already put out a video with my thoughts on Dune Part 2, which I'll link in the video description, so instead of repeating myself, I'm gonna do the only other sensible thing that there is to do, and cast this movie as if they made it in 2003. I'm talking peak early 2000s, baby. First, you swap Timmy out for the boy prince of his generation, Josh Hartnett. For Zendaya, I was tempted to pull a doucheku, but I went with Gabrielle Union. For Rebecca Ferguson, I think you gotta go Angie. For Florence Pugh, you gotta meet one grumpy little face with another grumpy little face and go Julia Stiles. For Austin Butler's sitcom child star trying to do some serious acting, look no further than The Kutch. For Javier Bardem, Ken Watanabe. For Stellan Skarsgård, I'd go Billy Bob if he swore he could tone his shit down. For Josh Brolin, unfortunately, I think you gotta go Mel Gibson. For Dave Bautista, you'd try to get The Rock, but you'd end up with Stone Cold Steve Austin. For Christopher Walken, him. For Charlotte Rampling, one of them. And last, for the Sandworm, I'd go Tommy Lee Jones to do the voice and call on Hollywood's truest chameleon, Dana Carvey, to do the motion capture. Next up, The Sweet East, written by Nick Pinkerton and directed by Sean Price Williams. The Sweet East throws a lot at you, from Pizzagate, monks, and a swastika bedspread, to a musical number, people getting their head blown off, and whatever the fuck this thing is. It's a lot. But shockingly, my main problem with the movie isn't how varied the beats of the story are, it's how long we sit in each of them. The editing needed to be sharper and less indulgent, and the tone, if anything, should have been as heightened as the world of the film. I'd still call the movie a success, but I'd also say I'm looking forward more to what Sean Price Williams does next, rather than revisiting this anytime soon. The two main standouts for me would be Talia Ryder giving another great understated performance, and the stress-inducing music that oozes out of the screen in just the perfect amount. 3 stars. Then on a rainy night, I put on 1967's In Cold Blood, written and directed by Richard Brooks. One of those rare films where it genuinely feels like every decision was made correctly each step of the way. Just fully realized, fully lived-in decisions, all in service of telling the most engrossing story in the most engrossing way possible. Director Richard Brooks advocated for casting unknowns instead of stars like Paul Newman and Steve McQueen to make the film feel more real. Smart. He also chose to shoot in the actual murder locations, the surrounding town, and even use some original jurors in the courtroom scenes, all of which paid off in eeriness brilliantly. But the smartest decision in assembling the film was scoring it with Quincy Jones's exuberant brand of discordant jazz instead of something more in line with the dour, dreary world of the film. Even now it feels like a massive gamble, but one that helped this film carve out its spot in cinema history. I also want to highlight the effortlessly slick scene transitions and dialogue that make me want to be a better writer. There are so many lines in this that hit me deep, from casual bangers like "murder is no mystery, only the motive," to all of Robert Blake's powerful closing jail cell monologue delivered to a rain-spattered window.
I guess the only thing I'm gonna miss in this world is that poor old man and his hopeless dreams.
Just a stunning film and a new addition to my Screenplay Hall of Fame. 5 stars. Next, I tripped the fuck out with 1980's Altered States, written by Paddy Chayefsky and directed by Ken Russell. Paddy Chayefsky wrote what I consider the best screenplay of all time, Network. Please fight me in the comments. So anytime I come across one of his films, he's got a sky-high bar to cross. Altered States is no Network, but I had a good time for the most part. The film follows a psychopathologist who starts experimenting with sensory deprivation as a way of exploring other states of consciousness, only to discover how volatile and life-altering those states are. It feels like it was made way more recently than 1980, with its striking, malevolent tone and truly disturbing hallucination sequences that feel closer to Aronofsky's Requiem for a Dream than Cronenberg's The Fly. It gets bogged down early on by run-of-the-mill family drama beats, but the last act floors it to the finish line with impressive visuals and unexpected heft. It's also the film debut of both itty-bitty Drew Barrymore and less itty-bitty William Hurt, who really catapulted off of this film into an unrivaled decade of films like The Big Chill, Broadcast News, Body Heat, Children of a Lesser God, The Accidental Tourist, and Kiss of the Spider-Woman, which earned him a Best Actor Oscar. 4 stars. Then I checked out 2019's Sibyl, written by Justine Triet and Arthur Harari, and directed by Justine Triet. After last year's Anatomy of a Fall grabbed cinema by its throat and smacked it around a bit, I've been excited to check out this film that reteams Anatomy of a Fall's director, writers, and star. Telling the story of a morally dubious therapist who becomes increasingly obsessed with a distraught patient of hers, the film explores similar themes to Anatomy of a Fall like perception, intention, and our own slippery sense of right and wrong. I love a slimy protagonist, and Sibyl is quite the slimeball. She views everyone in her life as nothing more than a character in her main story and seems more interested in how people can be of use to her than their value as a person. Her addiction to manipulating and toying with people leads her down some truly messy paths, often with other characters paying for her mistakes. And although Sandra Hüller isn't the lead in this, she steals every scene she's in by riding the same line of likability and monstrousness that earned her deserved fanfare and an Oscar nom for Anatomy of a Fall. 3.5 stars. Next up, I watched 1983's Testament, written by John Sacred Young and directed by Lynn Littman. A pretty flat TV movie that got released as a big boy movie all about how one average American family struggles to stay alive in the aftermath of nuclear fallout. As bold as that sounds, there's really nothing memorable going on here, other than a painfully awkward scene that will haunt me till I too inevitably die amidst nuclear fallout. Jane Alexander's teenage daughter, who is slowly wasting away, asks her mom what sex is like because she'll never get to experience it, and Jane Alexander answers, "You have a space and another person fills it up." Gross, gross, gross. 2 stars. Then I watched 1967's To Sir with Love, written and directed by James Clavell. Think of where I'd be as a person if I had a teacher like Sidney Poitier who reprimanded me for my sluttish nature and taught me vital school lessons like how to make a salad. My education failed me, hoping the next generation fares better. Also, even though it's pretty catchy, it's flat out ballsy to play your movie's theme song once over the opening credits, a second time mid-movie, cast the singer as a student and have her sing a live version at prom, and then again over the end credits. In any other film with any other song, that would be Bedlam. 3 stars. Speaking of Bedlam, 1920's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, written by Karl Mayer and Hans Janowitz and directed by Robert Wien. This is a nightmarish ball of German expressionism that hammers home how unnerving and disorienting the world seems when we're on our heels, struggling to connect, be understood, or feel safe. The bulk of that nightmarish look comes from the mix of severe, angular production design and funhouse mirror proportions that give the film a gothic fairy tale feel. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is also a great example of using production limitations as sources of inspiration rather than seeing them as hindrances. Because of the film's incredibly small budget, the production design had to be created for next to nothing, leading to sets created mostly out of large sheets of paper with shadows painted on. It's a pretty clever workaround that stands out even today as the film's unique calling card. I'm not quite sure what to make of Nicolas Cage naming this his favorite movie of all time, but I'm sure there are some kernels of insight hidden away here as to what makes Nicolas Cage tick, and we could all use some extra help with that, I'm sure. 4 stars. Then I checked out 1953's Mogambo, written by John Lee Mahin and directed by John Ford. After being blown away last month with John Ford's dreamy noir The Informer, I have to say this was underwhelming. Even though this is set in the lush plains of Africa, so much of this movie is comprised of boring medium 2 shots that make little use of that landscape. Those medium shots really put the focus on the acting, which is nothing to write home about. The one real plus is the solid dialogue, with a particular favorite line of mine being Ava Gardner's, "Everything snarls around this joint." 2.5 stars. Then I went to the theater to see Problemista, written and directed by Julio Torres. Hands down, the most I've heard a theater laugh at a film in forever. Everyone seemed eager to guzzle down Julio Torres' sweetly offbeat brand of humor and storytelling, and I got to just bask in the experience. And God bless Tilda Swinton for not only choosing to tackle such a strange, unwranglable role in such a strange film, but also for knocking it out of the park. She's one of the best actors working today, and I'm going to push unreasonably hard for her to get at least some awards recognition for this next year. Just a heads up. 4.5 stars. Then I finally got around to watching a Criterion I've literally had for years and never seen, 2018's Wildlife, written by Paul Dano and Zoe Kazan and directed by Paul Dano. I'm not shocked that Paul Dano's first and so far only film as a director is as unassumingly great and empathetic as he is. I'm more shocked at how well-oiled everything seems for a first-time director. It doesn't hit as satisfyingly as a whole, but you'd be hard-pressed to point out rookie mistakes or naive choices in the direction. He's clearly done his homework and knows this story inside and out. Jake is fine as the distant, spiraling dad, but it's Carey Mulligan playing one of her rare, unlikable characters who dominates the film. The way she harnesses her resentments to use as a weapon against others is the stuff sociopaths are made of. I think if she had a bit more screen time and a more blatant Oscars moment, she really could have found more award season traction. 3.5 stars. Then I powered through a couple movies on a plane, starting with 1968's The Swimmer, written by Eleanor Perry and directed by Frank Perry. This feels like the bastard child of Death of a Salesman and A Christmas Carol that went to boarding school and became a douchebag. And I mean that as a compliment. The film follows an exceptionally fit Burt Lancaster as a man trying to recapture some past version of himself by swimming across his privileged Connecticut town, one swimming pool after another. For as dark as this turns in the last act, the first 2/3 really lulls you into the same dreamlike world Burt Lancaster's character chooses to occupy, with chipper dialogue and euphoric shots of Burt's face superimposed over endless sky and lush greenery, with his blue eyes twinkling through. As Burt's parasite of a protagonist slowly faces the truth of his life and choices, the film really finds its stride. It's probably the saddest movie of the month so far, which is saying something after Testament's "Mom, I'm dying, but before I do, describe sex to me." In particular, The Swimmer really wallops you with the dialogue Burt's character uses to keep himself buried in denial, like, if you make believe hard enough that something is true, then it's true for you. That's heartbreaking. What's not heartbreaking, though, is an impossibly young Joan Rivers in her film debut. You nailed it, Joan. 4 stars. Then somewhere over Arizona, I watched 1950's So Long at the Fair, written by Hugh Mills and Anthony Thorne and directed by Terence Fisher and Anthony Darnborough. A true gaslight, gatekeep girlboss of a film that also doubles as a half-decent thriller with twists to spare. It tells the story of a young woman vacationing in Paris with her brother during the famous 1889 exposition where the Eiffel Tower was unveiled. One morning she wakes up, can't find her brother, his room, or any proof that he was ever even here. A true old-timey version of the classic Jodie Foster flop, Flight Plan, that I didn't know I needed. It's an enjoyable ride to be sure, but I wish the characters and their relationships to each other were fleshed out more so the audience could do more detective work into what is truly going on here. I also wish the ending gave more closure, or at least let you marinate in the final reveals a bit longer before the end pops up on screen and it's all over. 3.5 stars. Then as I made my descent into the Dallas-Fort Worth airspace, I watched 2020's Eyimofe, This Is My Desire, written by Chuko Asiri and directed by Ari Asiri and Chuko Asiri. A great film about how we redefine our dreams, how our dreams are redefined by the world around us, and the gray area in between. Told in 2 halves, each following a character wanting to leave Nigeria for a better life abroad, the film underscores the lethal nature of indifference, how it manifests, how it spreads, and how it takes root. The moments of crossover between the 2 stories were nice, but too slight for me to really justify how bifurcated the story felt. That feeling could stem from the Marvelification of film that glorifies team-up movies, but when the credits started rolling, I still needed more. 3.5 stars. And speak of the Marvel Devil, I capped off the first half of the month by rewatching 2017's Thor Ragnarok, written by Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher L. Yost, and directed by Taika Waititi. The last few years, my mom's been on a quest to work her way through the MCU for the first time, so inevitably when I'm back home, we get around to watching whichever one's next on her list, which this time was Thor Ragnarok. If I'm honest, I remember this being much stronger of a film that popped visually more than it did. Also, my mom asked which actress was playing the villain, so I told her Cate Blanchett, to which she responded, "No, doesn't look like her," to which I responded, "No, that's her," to which she responded, "No, that's her," in a mocking voice and totally burnt my ass. Nothing like being home. 3.5 stars. Keep an eye out for another video featuring the rest of my March watches very soon, but in the meantime, let me know in the comments what are your thoughts on these movies, any others I should check out, did I get any of my Bush-era Dune cast wrong? Also, stay tuned for other great commentary videos, reviews, video essays, and more. You can check me out on Letterboxd at Cineramadome24 or on Instagram at FilmInTheBlank. I appreciate you liking and subscribing. See you next time.